keeping with cattle, and for many of them, home on the range is more than just an old song, it's a way of life. On that range, there's a multitude of research opportunities dealing with water, grazing, and animal health, just to name a few. And as Market Journal's Maddie McIntosh explains, the work being done there is crucial for advancing agriculture in Nebraska.
Western Nebraska's rangelands are home to many ranchers and producers. Spanning nearly half of the state, the land is used for a variety of purposes.
So rangelands cover about 23 million acres in the state of Nebraska. Most of that's in the Sandhills region and also in the northwestern part of the state. This is about 47% of the land area of Nebraska. And these rangelands are extremely important to our beef cow industry, which is about 1.9 million beef cows in the state. It currently ranks us about fourth in the nation in the number of beef cows. And those cows spend a portion of their time on these rangelands. Some of them are year-round. And so not only is it critical for our beef cattle, these rangelands also provide a wealth of ecosystem services, wildlife habitat, water infiltration, soil erosion control, carbon sequestration. These rangelands are extremely important to us as a society, not only just to produce a product in beef cattle.
Mitchell says it's important to understand how cattle graze in order to provide them with the most nutrition possible. That's why his research uses collars with GPS trackers to find out where cattle prefer to graze as the year progresses.
So I got interested in using GPS collars and tracking devices to monitor how grazing behavior influence some of the plant-animal interactions. So we know that certain behaviors in cattle indicate where they'll go to graze and where they might graze more. So we're really looking at these preferred areas and how cattle go back to those areas over and over again and may utilize those areas more than other areas of the pasture. And so we're really looking at how their behaviors change over time within a pasture as there becomes less and less forage as grazing increases on a pasture. We're also doing some research looking at how cattle utilize some invasive species. And so this is in the Panhandle where the annual invasive grass, cheatgrass, is very common and it's intermixed with a lot of our perennial grasses. And so the goal of this research is to really look and see how animal behavior can be employed to target grazing on the cheatgrass at certain times during the year, to really focus the utilization of that as a forage while also reducing the amount of that species that goes to seed. And so we're looking at that from the standpoint of, can we graze it really hard in the early spring, get off of it, and let the perennial grasses grow uninhibited without grazing.
While this may sound like a good idea in theory, Mitchell says it can prove to be difficult in practice. This is due to the fact that, just like humans, no two cows are ever the same.
So cattle are individuals and they respond differently, and we're finding that more and more is that some herds just function differently than other herds, and it could be partly because of herd size, it could be partly because of pasture size, distance to water. There's a lot of factors that come into play in some of these behavioral differences, but it comes also down just to the individual, and you know, we're finding that some individuals might select a certain area more than others. Some animals may be more willing to go farther distances from water than others. And so part of that could be genetics, part of it could be learned behaviors, and you know, part of it could just be preference. Some animals just prefer to stay in lowlands and don't care to go much on the hills, whereas others might be the opposite. And so there's benefits in both ways for some of these animals.
Overall, Mitchell says the combined data will hopefully leave them with a good idea for different grazing strategies, which will help cattle graze more effectively in the future.
So a big thing that we're looking at a lot of this research was with Dr. Walt Schock and Dr. Jerry Valesky that they've done at the Barter Brothers Ranch, which is near Rose, Nebraska, but looking at different grazing strategies. And so looking at everything from continuous grazing, where cattle are placed in a pasture all summer long during the growing season, and how that influences spatial heterogeneity of plant species and structure and height, as well as production at different topographic positions across the sandhills. and also looking at that in comparison to a very intensive rotational grazing strategy, as well as a moderate grazing strategy of 3 or 4 pastures. And so a lot of that research they're looking at to really see how these different grazing strategies influence some of the plant communities, and how we can use these strategies, one, to improve efficiency of our beef cattle production, also looking at how it can manage for some of these more beneficial species that we want to see out there for livestock production, but also see how it affects plant communities that might have other ecosystem services for maybe wildlife species or some of these other services that are also important to have on rangelands.
Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Maddie McIntosh.
Other tools, such as drones and remote sensing, may be used in the future to help researchers gain a better understanding of changes in rangelands.